everybody, today I'm coming live to you from the Duke Farms greenhouse, which is a beautiful place to come this time of year to get a good dose of vitamin D. We're going to be talking about seed starting today. So some of you might prefer to just go to the garden center, pick up your tomato, your eggplant, your kale plants, bring them back to your house and plant them in the yard that very same day. Others of you are ready to sort of expand your gardening knowledge and start your own seeds in your house. So you can do that any place that it's warm. Basements work perfectly fine. Garages are probably a little bit too cold unless you have good insulation. Some people I know do it in their dining room. It all depends on your spouse and who you live with. So you're going to start with some good seed starting mix or germinating mix, whatever variety, they're called different things sometimes. Make sure you're buying a quality product, because I know a lot of people think, I can go to the dollar store or even like a large box store and get some seed starting mix. And a lot of times it doesn't work out in their favor. There may be egg masses in there that will hatch when they get into your house, or some other unpleasantries. So go with a quality brand seed starting mix. So Coast of Maine makes a really nice one. Gardener's Gold makes a nice one. Today we're going to be using a brand called Pro Mix, which I buy in humongous big bales. And I'm not sure if they sell a smaller one for the home gardener, but that's called Pro Mix. So what these all have in common is that they should be a sterile mix, soilless basically. So you don't want to ever go out to your garden, dig up soil and bring it into your house, because it's going to be a little bit too heavy to start seeds. And also, like I said, it may have fungus spores or insect egg cases that once they get into the worms of your house are going to start hatching out. Not a fun thing. So it's usually a mix of perlite or vermiculite, which are those little white or shiny pieces inside of your potting mix and seed starting mix. It usually has some peat or coconut coir in there, and it may have some fertilizer. So if you're an organic gardener like I am, you want to look for an organic seed starting mix. So that means if it has some fertilizer in it, it's going to be organic. So something like blood meal or worm castings might be in your seed starting mix. And that's totally fine, but you want to avoid things that say like slow release inorganic fertilizers. Those are chemical based. That means your plants are going to end up being dependent on those chemical based fertilizers and may have a tougher time adjusting to an organic gardening setting. Plus, when you plant the transplant, you're going to be putting that soil into your garden. So I always prefer to stick with a organic variety. What you want to do, what I love to do, is put my seed starting mix actually in a large container, Rubbermaid. A bowl works too if you're not going to be starting that many seeds, and get it pre-moistened. So what you want is, sometimes it comes out of the bag and it is like so dry, like dusty. So I'm going to show you my soil right here, and what you can see is kind of crumbly, right? If I squeeze it, it doesn't really drip water, but it does hold together in place. So kind of like a brownie or chocolate cake it's compared to, so that it'll stay together. Has enough moisture to hold in place, but is not dripping. So what that means is once you put it into your containers, it's already pre-moistened. You don't have to overwater it when you're getting your containers filled. All right, containers. There's lots of different containers to choose from. Some people actually don't even purchase containers. They'll use plastic recycling from their house, like little yogurt containers, or even paper cups. Any of that is fine. Just make sure the quantity of soil is not too much. For instance, I have a container here. And this would be akin to sort of using like a solo cup or something like that. This has a lot of soil in it. I wouldn't use this to start a seed at the very beginning, because what happens is, first of all, you have to fill these with a lot of soil, and if you're starting a decent amount of seeds, that's a lot of money. They're not all going to germinate. So if a couple of them don't germinate, now you have this sort of wasted space. The other reason that you don't want to do this is because this holds a tremendous amount of water, and without any roots sort of sucking up and using that water, it can result in some mold or some fungus, because it's just a lot of stagnant water sitting there. So I would avoid using this. I use this sort of container for my transplants, my second set, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. What I recommend is using a smaller type container. So you can purchase these from the garden center. This is a 6-cell container. This is an 18-cell container. Okay, you can buy larger ones. This is a 50-cell container. And you can buy, up to this size, and then you can get even smaller holes. So you can get ones with 72, you can get one into the hundreds. I like the 50 size, or even the 35 size if you're gonna go with a full flat like this. But any of these will do just fine, depending on how many seeds you're gonna be starting. I like to have a carrying tray sort of hold everything together. So especially if you're gonna be moving stuff around, like when you're ready to carry it out to the garden, these are really handy. And a lot of times they'll come with these larger trays. So something like this, where you can line stuff up and carry it around, works really nicely. Has holes in the bottom to allow for drainage. You might see biodegradable containers. These are peat containers, seed starting containers. I don't love these. I don't think they biodegrade that well. So the idea is you can rip off the little square and plant it right in your garden. What you have to do is actually tear off the bottom before you do that. Plus they tend to linger. I don't like them that much, but you can try them. They also sell like cow manure pots, which add actually a little bit of fertility and nitrogen to your soil, I guess, and to your plants. But you can try them if you want. I prefer these because these I can use year after year. I never really have to buy them again unless, after a couple of years they might start cracking, and then you do have to recycle them. There is one other way to start seeds, which is to use a seedling blocker. And I'm gonna demonstrate what that looks like. Basically, this is 5 little squares. What you do is you pack the soil right into here. You get yourself a solid tray, something like this, or whatever, even a pizza tray or something will work. And you actually can stamp out blocks of soil, so you don't need individual containers. Those little blocks can then be planted right into your garden when you're ready to do that. So I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a moment. All right, once you have your seedling container picked out, I'm going to use today the 18 because I'm not actually starting that many seeds. For me here in New Jersey, it's only March 1st. It's actually a little bit early to start most of these seeds, so I'm just doing these for demonstration today. So I'm just going to use this 18. Okay, so let me drag my pre-moistened soil over. I'm just going to go ahead and start filling the holes. And you really want to actually pack the soil in. A lot of people think like, oh, it should be nice and fluffy. And the soil itself is nice and fluffy, but you actually want to pack them into the holes. So I kind of fill them, press them all in so that there's not huge air spaces. Because what happens if there's huge air spaces, when you water it, it's going to all settle down. And then your seedling is going to be sort of lost in there. Your seed, I should say. Okay. So I fill them right up to the top. This one a little more. Make sure they're all kind of even. And once you pack it down, your thumbprint is kind of where that seed is going to sit right in the middle. Okay, let me show you how I work this soil blocker now. So I take my soil blocker right into the seedling mix, seed starting mix. And this is, again, this really requires pre-moistened soil. I'm just gonna kind of pack it in there, really, really press hard because the squares have to really adhere to one another. If you buy these are from Johnny's Seed, and they do have directions for the seed starting mix that works the best with these, but I find that most of them work just fine. So I've never actually done anything specific. Okay, so as you can see, I have the 5 squares blocked together. This out of the way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press my seed blocker right into the bottom of the pan so it's touching. And then I'm gonna really push all my weight on the little release and then slowly bring it up. I'll show you what this looks like. So this is what you come up with. 5 little soil blocks with 1 little hole in the top where your seed drops. Now what you could do is fill this whole tray and then go ahead and drop seeds in there, and you'd have yourself a nice little place to start seeds. So that is definitely an option. I'm ready to get some seeds in place. Now, the biggest problem with starting seeds, like the number one issue that people have, is planting the seeds too deep. You plant a seed too deep in the seed starting mix, it will not germinate. Seeds are really tiny, and they only have enough energy to kind of pop up a very little bit, and then they start to send down their roots. If you have a whole bunch of soil plopped on top of them, they're never going to be able to get past that crust of soil. We're going to be starting 2 different seeds today. I'm just going to show you 2 different techniques. So we're going to be starting some kale. I love red Russian kale. And this lettuce, which is a new variety. It's a butterhead lettuce, but it's supposed to be super cold hardy. So I'm going to actually try, once these guys get going, to put them in my cold frame, probably like the middle or to end of March, and see how they do. Okay, so kale seeds, put them up. I always have an apron on because I'm a messy seed starter. Okay, let me show you what these guys look like. here we are. All right, so you can see, oh, I'm dropping them. They're about 1 millimeter wide. They only should go as deep as they are wide. So what I'm gonna do with these kale seeds is I'm gonna just drop them in and then basically like give them a little bit of cover, but not very much. I'm just gonna go where my thumb sort of made that imprint into the soil. If you can't see it, you can do it again. Matter of personal choice, 1 seed or 2 seeds per cell. If you do 2 and they both germinate, you could gently try to get one of them out and transplant it. Or if you do 2, you could always clip one off, but you only, in the end, only want 1 per cell because that's gonna give it a nice amount of space. So I usually do 2 per hole. Okay, perfect. This little one back. Okay, so they're in here now. What I'm gonna do with the extra soil is I'm just gonna gently, barely cover it. Again, you're only really covering it with 1 to 2 millimeters of soil to get it just sort of protected in there. I want to label so that I remember what it is and when I started it. So this is red Russian kale. Today is March 1st. Okay, pop that in there. I always like to label the date that I started because on the packet it'll tell you how long it takes to germinate, usually. This says 7 to 10 days to germination. So I'm gonna know after about 10 days if it hasn't germinated, that one's probably not going to germinate. Seeds do last several years, like up to 5 years sometimes, but if it's a very old packet, you might do like overseed it, put 3 or 4 in there just to make sure that they lose sort of germination reliability after several years. Okay, let me show you what these lettuce seeds look like. They are really small. Okay, so they're flat. They're not like the kale seeds, which are round. Now, lettuce needs light to germinate. Most things do not need light to germinate. Lettuce does. So what I do with lettuce is I actually just sprinkle a couple seeds on the surface, and I don't cover them up. So I'm just gonna do, and they're so tiny, so if you get like 3 or 4 in there, it's fine. Lettuce seeds usually come in like containers of 500 seeds. So I never worry about overseeding the lettuce. Okay, so I did those 2 with the lettuce. Put back my extras. And I'm gonna label. I've got the kale gently covered, the lettuce is open. My next thing that I want to do is water. So when you're watering your seedlings, it's really important to give it a really gentle watering until its roots are established. Because if I come in here with a really hard spray, the seeds and the soil are gonna go flying everywhere. So test it. You have a small watering can, or even like the plastic water bottle sometimes I use, with like a squeezy tip, and I use that in there. Since I'm in the greenhouse, I do have a hose that has a really fine spray like this. Okay, so all I'm gonna do, now remember, the soil is already moist, so all you're really doing is wetting that top, just kind of settling those seeds, and that is it. Try not to get your seed packs wet like I just did. Obviously, that's not a good idea. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put these, it's called a greenhouse cover, onto my seeds. And all that this does is hold the humidity in there so that actually the soil stays much moister. You'll see all this condensation forming on here. That's really good. That's gonna keep your soil moist and make your seeds germinate a lot faster. If you don't have a cover like this, you can use plastic wrap or something like that. You can leave them open. I don't always use this, especially if I'm starting a bunch of seeds, but it does speed up germination a decent amount. These don't need to be placed in the light in order to germinate. Even the lettuce is fine in the dark, because the daylight is fine for it. But, so you don't need to place them in some place with light, but what you do need to put them is someplace warm. So seeds mostly like to germinate at between 65 and 70 degrees. That's like the approximate temperature that they will break dormancy with moisture. So I leave them here in the greenhouse, that's totally fine. If you have them in your house at room temperature, that's fine too. If you put them in the basement, which is what I do at my house, it's about 55 degrees down there, it's a little bit chilly. Certain things like kale and lettuce do totally fine like that. Other things like peppers and eggplant and basil really need to be a little bit warmer than that. So what I do is I have a Seedling Heat Mat, which is just a little like plastic heating pad. It just warms the soil up to 65 degrees. That's it. You can place it under your seedlings and let them germinate like that. So I do that for some of my things that need a little bit of a boost with germination. And that's it. You just wait for them to germinate. Once they germinate, the top comes off and they're gonna go under the light and they're gonna grow there until you're ready to either transplant them up to a larger pot or they're ready to go underground. So thanks for joining me today, and I hope I've given you all the information you need to get started on your own seed starting adventure. See you later.